podcast called Jellison Podcast.
He probably doesn't remember this at all.
Yeah, report together. It's easy.
This is kind of real. Like, holy shit.
And so it's really cool to get to be a part of that.
Hey, you know how it is, though. Hey, when
you now tune into the biggest ever.
We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
I don't remember that. That's crazy.
What's up, everyone? We're back with episode 125 of the Jellison Podcast. They have a very special guest. To my knowledge, the only one that's played football for Purdue and is a doctor, Dr. Joe Holland. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great, Deb. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been a fan of yours for, going on 15 years at this point.
I'm far removed now. I'm starting to become more like an old timer these days.
Hey, you said it, I didn't. But yeah, like you started playing when I was like, I believe I was 8. So I was born in 2000. So
I didn't need to hear that today, but no, I appreciate having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on. So first I want to talk about, obviously, you moved on from football. You're practicing dentist. So for people that might not know a little bit about your journey to getting there after football and like where you're practicing at. So, I mean, give the people a little insight about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I obviously appreciate the opportunity to be able to do so. Very not so inconveniently wearing my shirt today. So after I left Purdue, actually the way that everything kind of transpired was actually pretty interesting and kind of makes for a unique story from where I was to where I am now. I was accepted to dental school when I was still at Purdue. I actually found out when we were doing bowl prep for the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl. Mm-hmm. And so that was a huge relief. I mean, that was kind of always what I wanted to do, but obviously, the first step in doing that is being accepted. It is a fairly competitive field. So at that point I said, you know what, at least I know I got that. Who knows what football has in store for me. Any opportunity I'm given to continue playing football, I made up my mind that I was going to take. But at that point, I didn't know. I knew I was having a pretty good senior season. I knew I'd finally kind of grown into a position that I was probably undersized to play for a while. And I was finally playing with a lot of confidence. And so to know that if all else failed, I had my backup plan was actually my plan A. Really kind of was a nice relief for me. Following that senior year, I did some training. I was not invited to the combine. According to somebody, I was, one of the first out, but who knows? It doesn't matter. I wasn't invited. But had a good pro day and then got the opportunity to hop on in training camp with the San Francisco 49ers as a priority free agent, meaning I signed on draft day. I knew I at least had a home for training camp. So contacted the dental school and I said, hey, I have a little bit of a unique situation going on right now. And they said, by all means, we would hate ourselves if we tried to step in the way of your dreams. I kind of told them, I said, hey, the window to pursue this is minuscule. Said, if it doesn't work out, I would love to go to dental school as soon as I can. They said, by all means, next year, we'll revisit this and see how things go. Training camp in San Francisco was interesting and awesome. I realized pretty quickly that was probably not a team I was going to make, and was kind of curious as to why my agent kind of told me that this was a good route to go. The linebackers there were Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, 2 of the best to ever do it. Mm-hmm. The backups were Larry Grant and Tavares Gooden, both of which had started at other teams prior to getting to San Francisco. So I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? What I didn't realize was how much I was going to get to play in the preseason game, because those guys don't need any reps. I mean, they got their stuff down. They were just prepping for week 1. So I got a ton of playing time in the preseason, was able to make a couple plays and ultimately bounce around on some practice squads for the next year, with Tampa Bay kind of being my longest stint. Tampa was a good fit. I thought so. Great guys. Not a great team in terms of win-loss, but just a solid locker room. A lot of younger guys that were kind of in my same role, as opposed to San Francisco, which was a veteran team, older guys, and there wasn't a lot of spots up for grabs. Tampa was a lot less settled on who was going to be on the team the following year. So they offered me a futures contract, which means that I had the opportunity to go into training camp with them, OTAs, minicamp, the following year, obviously I accepted that.
Mhm.
Gave dental school a call, said, "Hey, it's me again. What do you guys think? Can I have the opportunity to continue playing?" What I didn't know is the dean of the dental school had since moved on. The former dean was a big sports fan and was very understanding of my situation. The new dean, while wonderful at her job, didn't care as much about sports. So I found out it was only maybe an hour of stress, but it was pretty much, hey, we only hold your seat for a year. If you want to play football for another year, you'll have to reapply and be reaccepted. What I thought was a difficult decision really wasn't. I mean, at no point was I going to give up a shot at the NFL, and particularly for a team I thought I had a good chance of making. So I said, okay, give someone else my seat, and I'll see you guys when I see you. 2 months later, I herniated a disc in my back, and that's just the way it goes, right? So I did do training camp with that injury, knowing that, as soon as I tell someone the extent of this injury, I'm toast anyway. Let's see if I can limp along. And I played in all the preseason games, but just didn't play great. I was hurt. And so finally, when I got released or when I got cut, and they kind of knew, okay, this guy's back is maybe a little worse than he was leading on. I figured a fringe guy like me, a practice squad player, there's probably 10 or 15 more guys out there just like me. I figured I got a big red X through my name. Let's go to dental school. It's 4 years. It doesn't get any shorter. Let's start now. So I had to reapply. I had to retake the tests. I had to re-interview. I had to do all that stuff. Thankfully, it worked out. I was accepted. I figured the fact they let me in once was probably probably going to help my cause quite a bit. But didn't make it any less stressful. So thankfully, I was able to kind of transition in 2014, and then I graduated 2018. Started working for a doctor in Fishers, and wonderful guy. I mean, like the perfect place to kind of transition into private practice. But with the understanding that I went into dentistry kind of for one reason, and that was to own my own practice. It wasn't that I grew up with some obsession with teeth or anything like that. It was just, this was an opportunity to enter the field of medicine and help people, but also be a business owner. So I kind of dove headfirst into an opportunity that presented itself January-ish 2020, and bought an existing practice from a doctor who was getting ready to retire. January 2020, good timing, 10 weeks before COVID. So that was definitely a challenge. I think a lot of the older doctors I've spoken to said it certainly won't get any harder than that. It's all uphill from here, or downhill from here. So it's, we created Holland Dental. It's on the west side of Indianapolis, Eagle Creek area. If anyone from Indianapolis knows where the Colts complex, I'm about a stone's throw away from them. Which also in and of itself presents a great opportunity because my practice actually sees most of the players and the coaches, which has kind of been a fun little perk of the job. I think it's official. I don't think I've played against any of the guys currently on the team. Jack Mehort was the last guy that I played against, and we just got a kick out of that. He's like, how are you my dentist now? But it is still cool. It still makes me feel like, certainly I'm not a part of the team or anything, but it gives me an opportunity to still be around football, something that means a lot to me. And, and just kind of talking to the guys about, to a very, very tiny extent, I can kind of relate. I understand the grind of training camp, and that Wednesdays are the tough days in the NFL. And so it's been awesome. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, my private practice life. But I wouldn't trade the way that anything transpired or went down. It set me back 2 years in eventually starting my career as a dentist. But those 2 years, being on a San Francisco team that ended up going to the Super Bowl that year, sharing a locker room with Randy Moss and Patrick Willis, it created some really, really cool experiences.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, first of all, thank you for laying all that out there. So I don't know how many Purdue fans out there know like your whole story. So I appreciate you doing that. And I mean, congratulations on all the things that you're doing now. I mean, I know January 2020 might not have been the best in terms of timing, but like, how many people would you guys have in like those first like month or two of the quarantine?
None.
None.
Yeah, we had to shut down.
So you
We shut it down entirely. It was mandated, so we weren't initially considered essential, which I think a lot of people kind of took offense to. So we, for almost the entire month of April, I didn't see anybody except for what would be considered a true emergency. Now, granted, I mean, we were scared of what was going on too. I certainly wasn't chomping at the bit to get back in and get back. And, my job is very intimate. So I was a little hesitant to see anybody. That being said, I was not going to turn anybody away that was in pain. I mean, that was an opportunity to kind of spend some more, help my individual patients that at that point I still didn't even know that well. So I think I definitely probably got some lifelong loyal patients out of that because of my willingness to help. But we were completely shut down for 6 weeks. Long days.
Man, when quarantine first hit, I was going through some stuff with my teeth, and I was in pain for like a month and I couldn't go.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean,
Bad.
that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so if there was, heaven forbid, anything happen again along the same lines, that would not happen again. And kind of the dental association made sure of that. But yeah, there was a lot of frustrated dentists that were just sitting at home doing nothing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. But you mentioned like I didn't have a thing about teeth growing up, like I wasn't obsessed with them or anything like that. But it fascinates me to like pick your guys' minds of like how you look at just like life in general. Because I mean, like for me, if you like are in a class or something and you learn a specific thing about life, I mean, you're walking down the street, you're thinking about that. But for you guys, I mean, you're in the game how many ever years at this point, your whole life. So like, do you just think about like teeth and like, oh, that person's teeth are disgusting, they need to get me, and things like that?
It is kind of like there's a running joke in the dental world, and again, like there's a reason why I don't hang out with a ton of dentists, because you're right, you can't stop talking about it. So like, I didn't really seek out a bunch of friends in dental school, because I noticed every time I was going out with, hanging out with these people, and I have one that I still talk to all the time. He'll be a good friend of mine forever, but you got to get away from it. Because yeah, I mean, it's easy you can so easily shift what would be a normal conversation to a weird experience you had with a patient, or it is nice to have colleagues to vent, not necessarily vent to, but kind of bounce ideas off of. I want to be involved in a community of people so I can learn and get help when I need it. But you do need to take a step away. It's tough to not immediately, like look at someone's teeth. I notice like reality TV shows, I'll notice if someone's like missing a tooth back there or something, and you can't turn that part off. But so that's a little bit of the curse of the job too.
Do you ever like, if you're ever like chilling with the boys or whatever, having some brews, watching football, and then you're like watching the Colts game, you're like, oh, I worked on his teeth, they're bad.
As bad. So I always want to. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't, but it is always, I always have that like that moment of pause where, maybe I did like a root canal on a guy like the week before, maybe even like 3 or 4 days before, and I'll just like need to be biting, like I'm not gonna say a word. No one cares. People care that he got a first down. They don't care that he did anything, that he had some dental work done. So yeah, I bite my tongue a little bit with that, but I'm not going to be that guy. It's like, oh yeah, I'm the reason he's out there.
I feel like I'd have a struggle doing that, because I just want to jump out and say I don't have much of a filter. But I mean, how many Purdue fans do you see like on a weekly basis or whatever, and they just want to talk to you about that? I mean, to an extent, because you guys dentists like to talk when we have a bunch of stuff in our mouth.
Yeah, I make sure I don't start the conversation until I jam my mirror in there is typically what I'll do. I have a lot of Purdue stuff hanging around the office. Like I have one of my jerseys, I have my helmet out front, and really it was just kind of a lazy way to decorate. It's not necessarily a Purdue themed office, but that actually it played a huge role in my life. And football isn't necessarily, I want to be known as like a good dentist, and I want to run a good business. I think that my football background is not necessarily all, it's just a perk, or it's just like a positive that we have to talk about. I don't think it has like a huge impact in my day-to-day as a dentist, but it is really, really fun for me talking to Purdue fans. And, it's always funny, we had a guy come in he goes to every single game. And I think it was the Friday before the Michigan State game. We were both just saying like, hey, this feels good. Like this feels right. And I said, you know what, take my cell phone number. And cause I had like a very small commitment right at the beginning of the Michigan State game. And I said, I know that you'll take this seriously. Text me updates and just keep me informed until I can get in front of a TV for the second half. And I was like, this is kind of cool. It's a professional relationship. But it is cool being around Purdue fans. Everyone has different experiences, when they were there, how often they go back, and it's kind of fun reliving some of the glory days with the patients occasionally. I get in trouble because I talk to them too long and I get everybody behind. So got to work on that.
Hey, fair enough. I feel like for a Purdue fan to walk in and have you working on their teeth of all people would be pretty cool. But I mean,
like I said, I'm an old timer. A lot of people are like, when did you play? So
I mean, well, the older people would know. Not old, but like I'm 21 and I still remember you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
come on over, Holland Dental.
Hey, when I'm back in town, maybe I will. I mean, from the jump, just talking to you right now, it feels like you're a motivated individual. I mean, how did you manage like the rigorous amounts of school at Purdue of all places in football? Because like for me, I'm struggling handling school, and I don't play a sport. I don't do the whole stuff for this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I can't take a lot of credit for that. First, my parents always took, my parents are the best. They were super supportive, no matter what. But one thing I think the reason that I'm so appreciative now is that they were like setting up habits for me without me knowing. So they were not like, hey, sit down and study right now. Or, they certainly didn't like crack the whip and make sure I was getting like straight A's. They paid attention. They were interested. They were involved. And before I knew it, I just had this routine of go to school, go to practice, knock out my homework, and then, good to go. So without even necessarily like, it never felt like, oh, this sucks. Like it just was kind of my routine that my parents somehow finagled me into without me even knowing. So I took that to Purdue, and then I take all the credit that, that I just gave my parents, and then I transition that to the academic staff at Purdue, because they will, whether you have that routine down yet or not, they will then beat it into you whether you like it or not. So it was a little bit of an easier transition for me because I was already kind of doing that. But they have the study tables, mandatory study tables freshman year. So again, you have someone that says like this, I have your syllabus, I know what's due. You're not leaving here until you show me it's done. So again, that if I was going to fall out of that routine, the study tables was not going to allow that. Mm-hmm. And then having the ability to take advantage of not sponsors, tutors, office hour ish, where, maybe there's a group of people that need help with a certain class and they'll have someone come in and offer some help there. I didn't have a lot of classmates that were teammates that were in my same classes. Mm. So I didn't necessarily have that, but if I ever needed anything, all I had to do was ask. In hindsight, I probably should have taken advantage of that more, but they really do a pretty good job. Like if you need help, it's there for you. That's not to say that if you don't do well in school, it's 100%, your fault, but there are plenty of resources there for you.
Well, I mean, the guys that Purdue recruits, though, they're looking at that as well. And I don't remember off the top of my head many guys that have been like kicked off the team for academics and stuff like that. Like that's pretty much a non-factor at Purdue, and it speaks to the level of individuals that they recruit.
Well, I think that's like my biggest takeaway from Purdue. We have one awesome memories of, beating Ohio State twice. And, I think people are always surprised to hear that one of my wins over Northwestern in 2010 was like my favorite win of anything I've ever had. It just was awesome. But the biggest takeaway, being, 10 years removed now, the guys that were on that team. And I know that every team has like, most of these people are cut from the same cloth, but looking back on the guys that I got to share a locker room with and a house with when I was there, just the incredibly high character guys that Purdue was bringing in consistently. This was not just like my 2007 recruiting class had great guys. Every single year after that had just really solid, Danny Durking, Ryan Kerrigan, Nick Mondek in my class, guys to look up to like Joey Elliott and Jason Warner and those guys from 2 years ahead of us, Chris Carlino, Carson Wade, like it just, the list goes on and on. Every year of high character guys coming in. And I think every guy I just named found his way on the field. And I think there's probably some pretty strong correlation behind that.
100%. And I mean, it continued through multiple eras at this point. Like it was obviously Joe Tiller when you were there for 2 years, and then Hope, and then Hazel, and now Brom. Like, I mean, I saw a thing the other day on Twitter. It was like Rondell Moore took 27 credits in his last semester and graduated with like above a 3.5.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that type of stuff at Purdue. It's insane that we've been able to keep that culture for however long.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, that's tough for anyone. That's tough for someone who has nothing to do all day but academics. And Rondell obviously had a couple other things on his mind. I mean, he knew what he knew he was at least going to get a pretty fair shot at the NFL and to still prioritize graduating. I almost feel bad. I could sit here and name guys all day. And Joe Tiller was huge on that. If you didn't fit the culture that he was trying to set up, and maybe he was a little bit before his time with now everything being so easy with the transfer portal, but he would do exit interviews at the end of each season and sit a guy down and look him, an 18-year-old, look him dead in the eye and say, "Hey, I don't see you playing here, or I don't see you fitting into our scheme." And that's a huge shot to your ego, but it's also like the best thing a coach could do for a player who has aspirations to play. I mean, if you want to go to Purdue for a free education, he would not kick you off the team. Mm-hmm. He'd say, but if you really wanted to see the field, he'd give you the opportunity to do so. It would just be somewhere else. And I think that's, what a great way to not only, demand some maturity out of your younger players, but also just give guys a chance to play college football. I mean, if he knows it's never going to happen, there's no reason to just let that guy sit and stare and hope and give him this false hope that he might play. If you don't fit in the scheme, you just don't, and you probably will somewhere else.
And I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's all you want out of a coach is, give you the opportunity to compete. You might not be able to see the field. And then if you're not, be just straight up with you. I've had a lot of Purdue basketball guys on, and every time they talk about Coach Paint, they talk about just like how real he is, and he's not going to sugarcoat anything. And I'm assuming that's the same with Coach Tiller. Yeah.
And Hope was the same way. And I'm sure Brom is the same. I haven't got the opportunity to know Coach Brom as well. But I'm sure he's the same way. I mean, there's a culture at Purdue that I think people take seriously, and it's going to kind of continue to be demanded from the AD all the way down to the fans.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Purdue, I know we talked about this before we hopped on, but this will go out Monday after the Northwestern game. But I mean, we do get to play at Wrigley Field, which I think is cool. Are you jealous that I don't think you guys ever got to do that, did you?
No, we didn't. We didn't get to do anything like that, really. We went. We had a couple like cool non-conference games. We went out to Oregon and played there, but nothing really special like that. Ford Field for a bowl game, which was pretty cool. Even like I think it was like 2 years after I left, they played Notre Dame and Lucas Oil, and I'm like, man, where was all this stuff going on when I was playing? I am going to the game. I'm super excited. Hopefully, when this airs on Monday, we're talking about the chance to win our 8th game against IU. I've seen the field. I've seen the layout. I think I saw something that they're going to go walk that field on Friday. I think that's really important because it's going to be a little strange for sure. Just the way they have it oriented. But that being said, I mean, the opportunity to play on, even just hang out on one of the more iconic fields in all of sports is special for all these guys. And it's definitely going to be something that they remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ryan Field at Northwestern is nothing to write home about. So getting to play Northwestern in Chicago, but not at their field is a huge plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is kind of a weird layout. Like the ends or the walls behind the end zones are super tight.
Yeah,
I'm praying that they're putting something up over that.
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to. I mean, like it almost takes like any high fade into that back corner kind of out of the ball, out of the game plan, because depending on what end zone you're going to, that's not there.
I mean, God willing, hope this doesn't happen. But if O'Connell throws something to David Bell back there,
you read my mind.
And something happens, we're gonna riot at Wrigley.
I won't make it home, I don't think.
But I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen. And I mean, we had the opportunity to play at 2 different baseball fields as well in the postseason with Yankee Stadium and the Pinstripe Bowl, and then Chase Field. I forget the bowl name of that game, but I mean, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's completely different from when you guys were in.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then, what's it like for you, and who gave your heart and soul to the program for 5 years, to look back and to see the program doing well again?
It's huge. I mean, it's just so much fun. My cousin is Danny Etling. So even, I never really wavered. I graduated, had wonderful relationships with Tiller and with Hope. I was actually in Tampa with the Bucks when Purdue hired Hazel. Hazel had a history with all those guys with the Bucks. Between, I don't know how he knew Greg Schiano, but Jeff Hafley, who's having a great head coaching career now. PJ Fleck was the wide receiver coach down there, and everybody came up and said the same thing. Like, this is the best hire in all of college football. And obviously, who knows? It just didn't work. Nothing against him or against the players or anything. But they brought Danny Etling on, and I was at pretty much every game I could go to just to watch him and support him. But those were some tough times. I mean, and it wasn't that they were losing every game. It was just that they weren't even in. By halftime, it was just like, let's all just stay healthy and get to next week. So to kind of almost be starting from scratch, to lose any momentum that was built in that hope, he won 7 games back to back. There was, the ball was kind of rolling, the momentum was building a little bit. And then just to have that completely stopped, you can't expect things to just, flip a switch and turn around. It takes a long time to get that train rolling again. And I think what we're seeing now is we had some momentum, and we're finally building off of it. This season you'll look back on this season, the players will look back on this season, to beat Iowa at home, and then a number 3 Michigan State. I'm sorry, to beat Iowa on the road at their home, and then beat Michigan State at Ross-Ade. I think there's a lot of Purdue teams that would just take those 2 wins and that's it. And the fact that we're already bowl eligible, and we're not talking about if we make a bowl, but what bowl we're going to go to, with 2 favorable games left on the schedule. It feels great. Indianapolis tends to be a pro IU city. So it is a very fun time to be a Purdue fan in Indy. And you just hope that this kind of continues to roll. Obviously we're going to probably lose a couple stars next year. Rightly so. They belong at the next level already probably. But, can we just continue to reload and build off of this and kind of make this the new normal, kind of like it was with Tiller. Bowl game every year, not if we're going, but where we're going.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, that's like your expectation as a fan, especially in the Big Ten. Like, get to a bowl game, and then we'll think about going to the next level. But I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, that when we let Hope go, I was confused. I didn't like that move at all. And I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to trust the athletic department to do what they do, I guess.
Yeah. I think everyone that I played with had a really, really good relationship with him, not only player coach, but he was a player's coach. So I think we also had a really strong personal relationship with him. So it was hard on a lot of people to see that, to go to back-to-back bowl games. And that 2012 team, I would have loved to be a part of that, because that was a fun season. That they were a couple plays away from being, potentially a 9 or a 10 win team. I think Notre Dame, the play clock debacle, and then Ohio State in Columbus the last second as well. I obviously remember those pretty well. I wasn't even playing in them. And then, so, I mean, I think, again, like I mentioned, I think that momentum was building and expectations were rightly so elevating. And I didn't quite understand it either. I know that he did not go out of his way to shake hands and kiss babies. He was very much kind of the guys within these 4 walls, meaning like the team meeting room were all that mattered. I just don't know if he played the game. Some of the politics that go into coaching, which you got to do it. If you want to last and you want to get the resources you need to build a great program, you just kind of have to do that stuff. And I don't think he wanted to. So, I don't think that played into his favor at all. But as a man, unbelievable guy. I went down to Bowling Green a couple of years ago and saw him with a couple of former teammates, and we didn't skip a beat. And his players meant a lot to him. His time at Purdue meant a lot to him. And that was, we ate breakfast together for like 2 hours, and that's all we talked about was how much we all kind of meant to each other. So, yeah, I mean, it's not my decision, but, and, I think for where we're at right now, it's fine. It's all fine.
Yeah, I'm not complaining whatsoever. I mean, how often are you and some of the other guys, I know you're pretty close with like a handful of guys, how much do you guys talk about like either praising the program or expressing your frustrations amongst yourselves?
All the time. Yeah. So it's never, we've all been on I've been on a 4-8 team. So I am never going to, cast the first stone. I'm always going to give, particularly the players, I'm always going to give the players and the coaches the benefit of the doubt. Because, that 4-8 team that I was on was one of the hardest working group of guys. I mean, we got bit by the injury bug. This was 2010. Keith Smith goes down, the returning Big Ten leader in receptions or receiving yards or something like that, gets hurt against Western Illinois. At one point, Sean Robinson, he's a good friend of mine as well, was a starting quarterback, and never good when your starting quarterback finishes a really great career he had at Mike Linebacker. So, I saw the effort that we put in every single week. The coaches were game planning their asses off. And and we were practicing hard and it just wasn't going our way. And there's been Purdue teams like that since then. Like it's certainly not a lack of effort. So I will say we praise people a lot. I think we all still watch the games kind of more from like a player standpoint where, it's hard for me to not watch the linebackers. It's hard for Kerrigan not to watch the DNs. And between the 5 or 6 of us, we can typically find out who either made a spectacular play or who was maybe out of alignment. But again, it's never, it's never negative. We're just all happy to see Purdue where they are today. And, but it is fun, the relationship that I've kept with those guys, it does make Purdue games extra fun. Cause I know that every Saturday, that group chat is going to be, all fired up and exploding. And it definitely keeps us all super close.
No doubt. And I mean, a lot I've had on, I don't know how many Purdue athletes at this point. And I mean, all of them talk about like just the family culture that Purdue brings. I mean, not only with the school and the players and the fans, but I mean, you guys amongst each other. I mean, what's it like to be a part of that yourself?
Well, and again, it's one of those things that I don't think you appreciate until, you're done with football and you're working and starting a family and moving to different cities and stuff like that. But, from where I am right now, I couldn't imagine putting a helmet and shoulder pads back on. I hurt myself tying my own shoes. So, but that's the kind, I don't necessarily miss at this point the football aspect, but you really miss the locker room. You miss living with your teammates. I mean, part of me even misses like 6 a.m. workouts. And I know it will. And if you told me I had to do one, I'd say no, but it's just like, you're going through that with your buddies. And it just, in hindsight, was the most special thing about Purdue. My very, very short time in the NFL gave me an opportunity to talk to guys from a lot of different schools. And I would say that most teams most guys had a similar experience. You spend every waking moment with these guys, so inevitably you're going to get close with them. But not everybody. I mean, not everybody had that same like brotherhood mentality that I so thankfully got to experience at Purdue. Some of the guys we're only 2 years removed from our college, and I'd be talking to one of my buddies and like one of the guys mentioned that he doesn't talk to anybody from that he played football with, and I just thought, to me, that was like so bizarre. I couldn't imagine just not catching up with some of these guys. And so again, hindsight, that's best part about the whole experience.
And I mean, that you share the same sentiment as a lot of athletes in general. I mean, it was really cool. I forget I think it was the Illinois game this year when the Rose Bowl team got back together, and you could just see that they're like messing around doing. It was like they hadn't missed a beat. It was like it was still 2001. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, and then a lot of those guys probably hadn't seen each other, in years. And like you said, you get to know someone so well and you're around somebody so much that, when I do get to see the guys that I got really close with, could be years, but it doesn't matter, whether it's a wedding or going back to a Purdue game or something like that, it's same old.
100%. And I mean, thankfully for you, you still live in the area, so you can go to games.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't imagine going somewhere far away and not being able to go to them.
Yeah, I know it drives some of the guys crazy. You never know where life's going to take you. And for me, I had a little bit more choice in the matter. I was probably always going to come back to Indy. It only makes sense to establish like a practice, where I know people and where I, ultimately wanted to call home. But yeah, I mean, life takes guys every direction and all around the country. And I know it drives some of them crazy that they're not back in God's country.
And I know we went over time a little bit, so I apologize for that. But I just had a few more for you. I mean,
yeah, I'm a talker, if you haven't noticed.
Hey, you're all good. I love that. Hey, it makes my job a lot easier when you guys are open and honest and sharing stories and stuff. So I actually really appreciate it.
Yeah,
but I was looking back I was going on like College Football Reference or whatever, I mean, you guys had a roller coaster of a time, especially when you were there, like that first, excluding your redshirt season. I mean, it's like 4-8, and then I mean, 09 was good, and then 2010 was good at the beginning, and then you guys dropped off, and then your senior year was, I mean, got capped off about as good as you can. But I mean, how tough was it to go through that roller coaster of a career there?
Yeah, that it's funny because like the further removed I get, the more I'm like, yeah, every team I was on was good. that just unfortunately, wasn't really the case. But what's so bizarre about looking back, that 2008, that entire team, it seemed like, went to the NFL at some point. We had Curtis Painter as our quarterback, Corey Sheets, who's one of the better running backs to ever play at Purdue, and Cliff Averill. I mean, the list just goes on. And that team went 4-8, I think. Yeah. With some really kind of some heartbreaking losses. But that's Big Ten football. That was a tough schedule. I think we hosted Penn State, who was number 1 in the nation at the time, or top 3 or something, and couldn't quite do what this year's team did. Went to Columbus. So yeah, you look back and you're like, man, like on paper, that team was stacked. And that was Tiller's last year. Thankfully we beat IU by about 70, but that was really the only really, and then we also beat Michigan on that hook and ladder from Desmond Tardy. But again, like you remember those times, but you don't remember, like I said, I think we lost to Minnesota at home, or, the ones you try to forget. But that's not the season that I look back on with a ton of regret. That's 2009. That season, I know you ask anybody who was on that team, and that will haunt us to our graves, because we were on the cusp. And it's easy to say now, but if you look back, all you'd have to do is watch the last 2 minutes of every single game, and you're like, oh my gosh, like how did we drop this one as well? Again, a super, super stacked team. Joey Elliott was playing lights out. Keith Smith, again, I think leading the Big Ten in receptions or receiving yards, and then a defense that I think at one point every single one of those guys was at least in a training camp. And I think we finished 5-7, but we won 4. We had a really, really good back half of, we beat Ohio State that year. We beat Michigan at the Big House that year, a ranked Illinois team. But then, you look back, I think we lost to Northern Illinois. We lost to Notre Dame last play of the game, Oregon last play of the game. And then thankfully beat IU again. So I'm going back through these years, and it was tough, but when I look back, I never think, well, that team wasn't good. That was just, a bad team. Every single team that we were on had a ton of like redeeming qualities. 2010 injuries, I think you can chalk that one up. But maybe it's just my admiration for my teammates and my coaches. But yeah, I can't help but look back and be like, no, that team was great. Like you sure we didn't win 9 games? But it really was. I mean, my career in general was kind of up and down, both from a team record and myself as well. I mean, I'm probably a little hypercritical of myself, but I thought I had a really, really good 2009 season and an average 2010. Thankfully, I had a good senior season. But that's not, again, I think to answer your question, it's just funny how I reflect on those teams, and I'm like, no, we were Rose Bowl every year.
Well, I mean, like that, if I'm thinking correctly, that 2009 season, I mean, Northern Illinois was actually, they've had some studs that are sleepers. Like they had Chandler Harnish was on that team, and then they had like Jordan Lynch, who was a freaking Heisman candidate from Northern Illinois. Like they're slept on. But like you look at those,
we lost that game, and then like as we continued to watch them, and that was the week after Oregon. I think it was like a complete letdown from a really heartbreaking loss on the road at Oregon. No excuses, but we watched Northern Illinois like we just kept an eye on their record. Like maybe that loss wasn't quite as bad as we thought it was.
Well, I mean, a lot of those games, like you mentioned, come down to the last play. I mean, you guys were super close. And then, I mean, ultimately, obviously, you mentioned beating Illinois, Ohio State, and Michigan later on that year. And then the next year, you guys started off hot as well. And then, I mean, ended up losing your last 6.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
2010. So it was just like a big roller coaster.
Yeah. That was the worst time. Back half of the season, 2010. We started off 4-2, 2-0 in the Big Ten with when Northwestern I mentioned and Minnesota, and then just every single guy that we really needed just kind of went down. Morale was pretty low, and again, you talk about like bringing it back, needing momentum doesn't it's built over time. The momentum was really low when you just keep seeing, not only some of your best players, but your friends go down. We were reeling a little bit. And I think I've blocked like the back half of that season of, we remember the good times.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. I mean, and then for that last year, I mean, talk about, you had probably your best season as a senior, and then to cap it off, going to a bowl game for the first time in your career, not only going to it, winning, and then obviously getting named defensive MVP of that game. I mean, how satisfying was that for you and the rest of the team as well?
Yeah, no, that was a really fun season. That season had its ups and downs too. I mean, I think we traded wins and losses for, the majority of that season. We had to beat Ohio State at home to really keep to keep our bowl hopes alive. And even that took a blocked PAT at the very end of the game. I think Bruce Gaston did it just to force overtime. So I obviously, if it was up to me, we would have won a national championship. But the way that I reflect back on that senior season, that was a great way to go out. Again, I would have always loved to win more games. I look back, Notre Dame, obviously. Iowa, we played pretty bad at home. That was senior day. But that was, I just felt that was also the most comfortable I'd ever felt playing. I was really, really confident playing that year. I knew exactly what I was looking for. I think from like an X's and O's standpoint, I was pretty far ahead of not only where I had been, but also, I just kind of had a better grasp for the game. So that season came so much more naturally for me than any other season. And when things are like, when everything's slowed down and it seems a little bit easier, it's really fun. Mm-hmm. And I look back at some of the games and, we beat Illinois at home. And that was, again, one of those games where that was just a fun game from start to finish because it never felt hard. I think we went up like 21-0 quickly. And I was like, man, if every single game could be like this, we were forcing three and outs like every possession, and it was just a blast. And, then to have a game in Bloomington against a pretty bad IU team, but, again, there's really no such thing when you're playing that game, to become bowl eligible, to have like kind of the hype around that game, to go back to our first bowl game in years. That was another game that was just fun. I mean, and obviously I wouldn't be saying that if the outcome was different, but that was one of the most satisfying feelings that I've probably ever had in football, to know that we had finally gotten back to a bowl game and beating IU was the reason. And that was an exciting game. I mean, it was closer than it probably should have been, but to get to go through bowl prep as a senior is a lot better than getting to go through bowl prep as a freshman. They beat the crap out of you as a freshman. Senior, they kind of, obviously you prep and you game plan and everything like that, but they're bowl preps for development. So I had a ton of fun in bowl prep. Redshirt freshmen probably didn't, but then, we were really disappointed that we ended up at Detroit. There's no reason to even sugarcoat that anymore. I mean, like when they announced that, everybody's, I don't think anybody cheered. We did some live announcement and it was like dead silent in the room. And then myself and Albert Evans and Chris Carlino had to go downstairs and answer questions about how excited we were to go to the Little Caesars Bowl. Penn State, that whole allegation, that whole thing with Joe Paterno was happening at the time. And they ended up getting passed on. They were a good team, but ended up getting passed on by some Bulls that didn't want that association. I think we thought we were going to end up in Dallas, and then instead we were in Detroit. And but again, I look back on that trip so fondly. I mean, it was so much fun. The game was fun. We played Western Michigan instead of Texas A&M, so that probably made for a little bit more of like a less stressful prep. And then that was just another one of those games. I had a whole month to prep for an offense that really wasn't super complicated. I think by the time the game rolled around, like I think I could pretty much call out every play they were running, and that allowed me to play loose and free. And I was actually surprised that I got named defensive MVP. Because I was like, I think I played okay. And then I think I had like 11 tackles or something like that. And it just didn't feel like that. I was just like, hey, I think I was involved, but really? I think had Gerald Gooden not had an excessive celebration penalty, he probably would have got it. But I'm happy for that to fall into my hands.
Hey, no doubt, you guys played a great game that day. I mean, you've kind of mentioned it a few times, but I really like hitting on it. I mean, over the course of those 5 years, what moments were most special for you? I mean, it could be an off the field thing. I mean, a game. I know you mentioned Northwestern was your favorite, but
yeah, and that's kind of like a strange pick for favorite. I even mentioned earlier that it's the field is not. There's nothing nice about the field. The visiting locker room is awful. But we were kind of rolling. We were having a pretty good time so far in that season. They were commemorating their Rose Bowl team, so it was a night game, and for a Northwestern game, it was pretty well attended. Rob Henry was our quarterback, and we played a good game. I think that Northwestern just kind of assumed that they were going to win, because as soon as we blocked the field goal, and then Danny Durkin scored a touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown. And so as soon as we won, it was a very close game. All the lights in the stadium went out, and we were like, well, this really, like, come on, don't be a sore loser. And then a bunch of fireworks started shooting off, and they started blasting Michael Jackson, "I Want You Back." And we were like, this is for us. I think the surprise of all that, like, I guess whether win or lose, they were going to do their post-game celebration. And it just so happened that we won a close one. And it was like they had it queued up for us. And I just remember just running around the field with Jason Warner and just being like, this is the best. And, little did we know how the rest of that season was gonna transpire. But it was just, that was one of those times where I kind of knew. I was like, I will not forget this. This one's going to stick with me. So, we had the fans rush the field twice, both after wins versus Ohio State. And, to be a part of something like that, not everyone gets that opportunity. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk all day, obviously. It meant a ton to me. And being 10 years removed, it just still means a lot. Like, it never really, that never fades, I don't think.
I can certainly tell, and you're similar to a lot of guys. They love talking about their playing days if they've moved on and things like that. But I mean, I can tell how much it means to you just in the short time that we've been talking here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm gonna wrap this thing up. But I mean, like I said at the beginning, thank you so much for coming on. It's truly an honor. Before we get off, tell people where you guys are located, where they can find your guys' information and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I've been following your podcast for a while now, and it's cool to see what you're doing. So congratulations on, what was this, 145 or something?
125.
125? Doesn't matter. That's great. So my practice is Holland Dental, if you're still watching at this point. We are accepting new patients. We're on the west side of Indianapolis, Eagle Creek area, right off of 465. So very accessible. My website's hollanddental.net. Someone had already stolen the .com, I guess. But pretty much any information, you Google Holland Dental, information will pop right up. So yeah, obviously I would always need more Purdue presence in my office. Too many IU fans coming to us right now. So yeah, and just again, appreciate the opportunity to get out there and promote myself while talking about something that means a lot to me.
No doubt, man. Well, safe travels up to Chicago this weekend,
thank you.
and hopefully we get the dub. But
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, man. Stay safe, and best of luck with life in general going forward.
All right, Dub. Thanks a lot, man.